On the first night, George Lutz couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, slipping through the window frames and creating an eerie wailing sound. Kathleen was fast asleep, but George couldn't shake the strange sensation that something, or someone, was watching them. The Lutz family had just moved into 112 Ocean Avenue less than a day ago. The colonial-style house was a dream come true, 5 bedrooms, a spacious yard, and a location right by a quaint canal. But from the moment George stepped through the front door, he felt an unexplainable unease. He didn't say anything to Kathleen at the time. The price of the house was too good to pass up, only $80,000, and they couldn't let such an opportunity slip away. But now, in the stillness of the night, a growing sense of dread filled him with every breath he took. George glanced at the clock at 3:15 a.m. For some reason, just moments after seeing the time, a bone-chilling cold shot down his spine. He pulled the blanket up higher and tried to shut his eyes. But in the silence, a faint sound reached his ears, a whisper, soft and indistinct, coming from nowhere. The next morning, Kathleen woke George with a smile. "Time to get up, love. We've got a busy day ahead of us." Groggily, George pulled himself out of bed, convincing himself that the strange feeling from the night before was just exhaustion after a long day. But as he made his way downstairs, the oddities continued. The kitchen door was wide open, though they had locked it tightly the previous night. On the floor, a trail of small footprints led from the doorway to the center of the kitchen. Yet no one in the family had shoes that matched the size. Kathleen noticed George's puzzled expression and reassured him. "Maybe it's just some mice or something." During breakfast, their daughter Missy suddenly asked, "Mom, Dad, is our house haunted?" Kathleen chuckled, but George froze. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" Missy simply smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Jody told me to ask." "Jody? Who's Jody, darling?" Kathleen inquired, tilting her head in curiosity. Missy didn't answer. She returned to eating her breakfast as if her mother's question didn't matter. As the days passed, the house seemed to exert a strange influence on George. He grew irritable, snapping at Kathleen over trivial things. She noticed that he spent an unusual amount of time sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames in a trance-like state. "Are you okay?" Kathleen asked one evening. George merely nodded, his gaze never leaving the flickering fire. That night, George dreamed that he was walking through the house with a large axe in his hands. In his dream, whispers echoed from every corner, urging him, kill them. Kill them all." When he woke, George found himself standing by the window, staring into the darkness outside. He had no memory of getting out of bed. Meanwhile, Missy spent more and more time in her room, speaking in hushed tones as if conversing with someone. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" Kathleen asked one day as she entered the room. "Jody," Missy replied without turning around. "And what does Jody look like?" Kathleen asked, forcing a smile despite the unease creeping up her spine. Missy turned to her mother with innocent eyes. "Jody's not a person. She's a big pig with red eyes. But they're beautiful." A shiver ran down Kathleen's spine. Determined to investigate, George decided to explore the basement after hearing strange noises from below every night. When he turned on the light, he discovered a hidden room behind an old wall. The room was painted blood red and had no windows. The air inside was thick and foul-smelling, choking George as he stepped inside. His heart raced as he took in the sight. He didn't mention the room to Kathleen, but from that point onward, his dreams grew more vivid and terrifying. He often dreamed of being dragged into the red room, surrounded by shadowy figures who knelt in a circle, whispering unintelligible chants. Kathleen, now deeply concerned, began researching the history of the house. What she uncovered horrified her. A year earlier, Ronald DeFeo Jr. had murdered his entire family in the very house they now lived in. Ronald had claimed that he heard voices commanding him to kill his parents, 2 sisters, and 2 brothers as they slept. When Kathleen told George what she had found, he fell silent. But from that day forward, the strange occurrences in the house intensified. The very night Kathleen revealed the horrifying truth about the house's history, the family was jolted awake by the sound of loud banging. It came from the walls, the ceiling, even the floors beneath them. George grabbed a flashlight and stormed through the house, convinced T. But there was no one T. Instead, as he shone his flashlight down the hall, he saw the front door swinging open. The icy wind howled into the house, though he was certain he had locked it. Beth. George, come here. Kathleen's panicked voice EC. George dashed to their bedroom, where Kathleen stood trembling, clutching Missy tightly. Missy's room door was wide open. I found her in the hallway, Kathleen stammered. She was walking toward the base. Missy looked up at her father and whispered, Jody said I should go there. She wanted to show me. George's patience finally broke. That's enough. Missy, there's no Jody. Do you hear me? Missy's expression didn't change. Jody says you're wrong. The words hung in the air like a curse, and George felt an inexplicable weight press. The following morning, the family began finding black sludge oozing from the walls. No matter how much they cleaned, it reappeared by the next day, dripping from corners and seeping into the carpets. The dog, Harry, began behaving erratically, barking at empty spaces and growling whenever George approached the basement. One evening, Harry refused to come inside, scratching desperately at the door to be let out. When George tried to pull him back, the dog bit his hand, a behavior completely unlike him. George's own behavior worsened as well. His once loving demeanor was replaced by a cold, detached anger. Kathleen barely recognized the man she had married, and the children avoided him entirely. One night, George stormed into the kitchen and found the knives scattered across the floor. His heart raced as he counted them. Every single one was there, except for the butcher knife. He found it later, stabbed into the wooden dining table. No one in the family admitted to moving it. The climax came on the 28th day. George woke again at 3:15 a.m., his body drenched in sweat despite the freezing cold. He stumbled out of bed, drawn by an unseen force, and descended the stairs toward the basement. As he opened the door to the red room, the whispers filled his ears, louder than ever. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air felt suffocating, as if he were being buried alive. Suddenly, Kathleen appeared behind him, yanking him back. George, stop, she screamed. Her voice seemed to break the trance, and George collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. We need to leave, Kathleen said firmly, tears streaming down her face. Right now. They didn't pack. They didn't look back, grabbing only their children and the dog. The Lutz family fled into the freezing night, leaving everything behind. Years later, George and Kathleen would recount their experiences in that house, claiming the hauntings were real. Paranormal investigators visited 112 Ocean Avenue, reporting unexplainable phenomena as strange smells, sudden temperature drops, and even eerie photographs of glowing orbs. Skeptics called the story a hoax, but the Lutz family never returned to the house. The nightmares stayed with them, a grim reminder that sometimes, even a dream home can turn into a nightmare.